Hello and welcome back to Scream Films, where we usually analyze movies and genres and discuss them. Today, we're going to be talking about one of the greatest revenge movies of all time, The Crow. The Crow, directed by Alex Proyas, is an American superhero film that some people call gothic or graphic noir action, crime, and drama with a supernatural thriller vibe. Originally a comic book written by James O'Barr, the movie was released in the US on May 13th, 1994. It has a 7.5 stars out of 10 on IMDb, an 86% Rotten Tomato score or Fresh Tomatoes, and a 90% audience score. It had a $23 million budget and grossed $94 million in the box office. This movie is an excellent tragic film, made even more tragic by tragedies surrounding the film. This movie was basically in production hell when it first started. Paramount Pictures, who were the original producers of the film, dropped The Crow upon the devastating news of Lee's death, and it was uncertain if the film would be finished since Lee still had a few scenes to shoot. Unable to resist the notoriety and publicity that The Crow has established, Harvey Weinstein picked it up through Miramax and collaborated with Alex Proyas, managed to salvage the film and change a few things around, scrapped a few things, did a few rewrites, and was able to use a stunt double in Lee's position to finish those scenes. Eventually, Paramount would get the rights to The Crow in due time, with the 30th anniversary coming out, which was released this year in theaters, and then as well as a 4K Ultra HD DVD as well to be sold. We're going to determine this movie is still good and holds up with 3 questions that are going to be answered at the end of this video. Does this movie hold up? Does it impact Hollywood or society? And if it's rewatchable. This movie has been acclaimed to be a darker film than other action hero movies that have been coming at the time, especially grungier and a more forbidden story than the likes of Tim Burton's Batman and Blade Runner. Is this true? Well, let's find out by starting with the cinematography. The cinematography in this movie is good and enjoyable. It feels very standard for an 80s and 90s action flick. The camera is usually still and doesn't have that early 2000s shaky cam vibe like other action movies would go around at the time, making sure that the actors are in the screen the whole time and they don't know how to fight in super tight close-ups. Bourne movies. This film is fast-paced and features many camera setups that evoke comics more than other films did at the time. A lot of tight framing, use of mise-en-scène, some wide shots of the city, and so on. There's a lot of push-in and push-out shots in this film. Push-ins can draw the audience's attention to a specific detail in the film. A lot of filmmakers also use the push-in on characters to try and infer what they're thinking internally. Push-ins can also immerse the audience and build drama, tension, and suspense. Push-outs, on the other hand, are mostly used to reveal a bigger picture for the audience. It also highlights a character's isolation in the shot, making them feel more lonely in the bigger world that they're in. The camera at the beginning gives off a lingering vibe while the audience follows Eric walking back into the world that he's left and see the aftermath of his and his fiance's death. The camera also feels flowy in this atmosphere. It doesn't feel choppy, and it makes the world feel bigger, which is nice to see. A unique idea that this film has done is the perspective of the crow. These shots show up every so often in the film, not used too much, and what they do is they kind of morph and warp the frame and kind of give it a weird edgy vibe. And the frame of the camera is also kind of giving that esque of society in the film. So overall, the cinematography is clean, smooth, and beautiful to watch. Nothing really feels out of place. The point of cinematography is to deepen the character's inner life, showcase a location, or tell an audience how to feel about a character in their actions, and this movie does it really well. Obviously, I'm not going to be talking about every single frame and what it represents or anything that takes too much time. Again, always watch this movie for yourself if you find it interesting, if you haven't already. Now cinematography talked about, let's go ahead and move on to sound and music. So I'm going to start with sound and then go into music afterwards. The sound design in this movie is very clean to listen to. From the rain, the fire, the interaction with the environment, it all feels crisp to hear. All the audio is easy to listen to, nothing is too loud to where the microphone is popping or anything. It all feels pretty well done. Since it is a 90s action movie, it does use some of those sound effects that are used in other 90s movies, which isn't bad, but it's good to point out. Someone has been able to gather every single sound effect that this movie's used, and I will tell you one thing, this list is long. It's totally understandable and okay to use stock sound effects. Sometimes you don't have the time to create your own, or it's not even worth it, or you're out of budget. Some movies to this day are still using those same old sound effects. Like in my Modern Horror Movies Are Failing video, I discussed that The Conjuring 3 used an old door sound effect that was in Lego Batman from 2006. So old sound effects are still being used to this day, so it's not the end of the world. So overall, the sound design is good, clean, crisp, and very enjoyable to hear. So now on to the music. The music in this film is special. The music is sad and dark at times, but also angelic at others. Some of the main music that's in the soundtrack is actually really thrilling, and it makes the movie better because of that. It helps justify the environment and the tone of the city, which works pretty well, especially since it's Detroit. The soundtrack is woven into the film, accentuating plot points and action scenes, and creating the atmosphere. It's also a dark reflection of the movie's comic book roots, as the original comic book features influences from many bands, especially from The Cure and Joy Division. For some examples of this, The Cure's The Hanging Garden is reprinted in the comic book. Some chapters are named after Joy Division songs, and Nine Inch Nails' cover of Joy Division's Dead Souls is also on the soundtrack. Other bands that are in the soundtrack are Pantera, Rage Against the Machine, My Life Was a Thrill Kill Cult, Machines of Love and Grace, and others. So overall, the music in this movie is very unique. It makes you feel sad, thrilled, and excited. Things that you should be feeling when you watch a movie. It's also a time capsule of the 90s and can be very nostalgic for some people. I cannot say that it's nostalgic for me, mostly because I was raised in a brain rot generation, and sometimes I wish I wasn't. With the sound and music out of the way, making a big impact on the movie, let's go ahead and go to lighting. The lighting in this movie is simply dark and gothic, but also beautiful. The movie mostly takes place at night in the rain, letting the audience know that the city is kind of corrupted and dramatic. It also has the colors of a giallo film and the darkness of German Expressionism. A giallo film is an Italian horror subgenre, often using bold, vivid colors that complement the sets and cinematography. These colors can create dreamlike and surreal sets, which can contrast the grim settings often found in horror and thriller movies. A famous giallo film that uses these colors very well is Suspiria. The colors in that movie are some of the brightest that I've seen, and it just makes a really cool atmosphere with the movie. A few colors that are shown in The Crow is red, blue, orange, and black. The red is used whenever Eric is feeling his or others' pains. Usually the color red represents intense and uncontrollable feelings, such as love and romantic passion, violence, danger, rage, or ambition for power. The blue and orange shows up whenever he's thinking of Shelley, especially when he was proposing to her. Blue usually represents feelings of serenity, sadness, or isolation. Orange represents a new day as well as youth, friendship, warmth, sociability, and others closer to memory and nostalgia. I wish I had some orange in my life, Jesus Christ. The black in this movie signifies grief, fear, mystery, and evil. Obviously, the blackness in the film is mostly going towards the dark and gruesome lighting adaptures of German Expressionism. The city feels big, dark, and spooky. It helps the audience feel what Eric is feeling with this expressionism of the darkness, which is the best expressionism that I've seen in a movie for a while with German Expressionism. For a quick recap of what German Expressionism is, it's a film movement that the Germans used after World War I to express themselves. They expressed inner turmoil, anxiety, and social discord of the people. It's usually expressed with tall and warped buildings as well as weird costumes and makeup. So the best example of this to this day is the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It kind of sums everything up as a whole of what German Expressionism is. So overall, the lighting in this movie is beautiful. The lighting makes you feel feelings that you aren't really expecting and add on to the film. Now that we're done with lighting, let's move on to something that helps you feel feelings: the acting. The acting in this movie is astonishing. Everyone fits their roles amazingly and really commit to their roles. The appearances are exaggerated to match that graphic noir vision, which works very well. If you've seen this movie, you definitely know this is Brandon Lee's magnum opus. He's the most important actor in this movie. He makes Eric seem like a depressed, gothic, vengeful spirit. He's able to step out of his father's shadow in this role, and obviously his father being the one and only Bruce Lee. One of my favorite lines that are in this movie is actually from T-Bird when he's quoting Paradise Lost. That line is, "Abashed the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is." He isn't able to finish the line since his character dies after he quotes that first part, so I'll fill in the rest of the gaps for you if you don't know it. The full version is, "Abashed the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is, and saw virtue in her shape how lovely, and pined his loss." This line reflects a moment where the embodiment of evil, the devil, is taken aback or made to feel uneasy in the presence of goodness. So this basically is T-Bird reflecting to Eric whenever he sees him for the first time, and he's kind of shocked. Because to T-Bird, Eric should be dead, but he's not, he's right in front of him. It is by far my favorite scene in the movie overall. The music, the lighting, everything works perfectly in this one scene, and every time I get to this scene, I get the feelings, you know? So it's a good line, and it just works perfectly for the film. Here's where I want to talk about the incident that happened on set, which obviously is Brandon Lee's death. For those that don't know what happened to him, he was shot and killed by a blank round while they were filming the scene with him and Funboy. Blank rounds are often used to get the same reaction of how a gun would be without the risk. But if you do it wrong, it can still be dangerous, obviously. Blank rounds still have the same gunpowder and power behind it as a regular gun, so it shouldn't be used at specific ranges. If the distance is okay for a blank round and the person who is shooting it is not pointing it at them directly, it should be fine. It should be safe to use. But if I got my information correct, the biggest reason that this incident happened is because they used sketchy ammo. So there are theories that the ammo was a tad bit overloaded, which obviously is not good. For YouTube's sake, this is fake. It's a prop. I made it. But like an actual round, there should be a specific amount of gunpowder that's in this. If it's too little, the gun should still go off, but the gun won't really cycle the round or anything. If there's too much gunpowder, you can actually cause risk. When the case is struck, so again, this is fake, so you can see that little circle there is the firing pin. Again, this is fake. Bullets are mini explosions, so when you hit that, the gunpowder ignites and it makes a mini explosion. If there's too much, that can cause an explosive failure. It can result in an explosive failure, which can damage the receiver, barrel, and other parts of the firearm. I believe this is what happened on set when they were filming, is they just accidentally used sketchy ammo and accidentally overfilled it, because you kind of need professionals to do that. I actually know someone who actually redoes their ammo, so they get new firing pins for the casings, they get new lead for that physical bullet, and they actually put the gunpowder in it and redo the ammo. So you have to have a specific amount, and that kind of takes some time to get to know, and I believe that they just kind of accidentally rushed it on set. It definitely sucks, because I believe this incident is really what caused the Lee family curse. The Lee family curse is the combination of Bruce and Brandon Lee's death, of them dying on set while they're filming a movie. Bruce Lee died while filming Game of Death. He had an allergic reaction to some headache medicine that he was taking at the time, and his brain actually swelled up and killed him. Both are very tragic incidents in the film industry, mostly because these two were really good at what they were doing, and, you know, they're gone from this world. We'll never see them in anything ever again, which is really sad. So overall, with the acting, it's some of the greatest that I've seen in action movies in a while. It's definitely very important to talk about incidences like this, with mostly Brandon Lee in this case, where an accident has occurred on set. Talking about it is very important so we can prevent that stuff from happening again and ruining sets and taking lives away that shouldn't have been taken away. So now, from moving to something sad that's probably going to be even more sad to explain. The story. Before I talk about the story, I wanted to go into some background of the story of The Crow and also Detroit overall. So as I said in the beginning, The Crow was based on a comic book series by James O'Barr. He created the character as a means of dealing with the death of his fiancée of the hands of a drunk driver. So already with the creation of this character, it's evolving around death. This movie's kind of cursed with the ideology of life after death. Obviously, with the death of Brandon Lee, whenever this film was released, it was the last time that people would see him on the big screen for the last time. So he was brought back from the dead when this movie came out, which makes everything 10 times better about this movie. Now on to the whole Devil's Night stuff. Devil's Night is a name for October 30th, you know, the day before Halloween or Hallows Eve in Detroit, Michigan, in that surrounding area of the Suburbans and whatnot. The term originated from the early 19th century as another way due to an increase of pranks and vandalism in the area, and is related to the informal holiday mischief night. Devil's Night is one of the reasons why Detroit either is or is part of the most dangerous cities lists. I am not from Detroit, so I don't really have much to say about the effects of Devil's Night on me or on the city itself. I believe I haven't watched the podcast episode, but Dead Meat Podcast, they did a live show of The Crow in Detroit, and I believe in there they kind of talk about the ideology of Devil's Night. I'm not sure if I'm wrong. My bad, I didn't watch it yet, but definitely if you're interested in getting to know more about Devil's Night, definitely look it up. It's definitely an interesting read. Some people say that this film is a heartfelt tribute, mostly to grief, longing, and love, and it leaves a mix of awe and bleak wonder. Others say that the film has a poetic screenplay charged with black romanticism. Is this true? Well, let's start with looking at the back of the Blu-ray, see if it has anything about the story. The Blu-ray's description of the movie says, "The Crow is the tale of young musician Eric Draven, Lee, who along with his fiancée is murdered on the eve of their Halloween wedding. Exactly 1 year after their deaths, Eric is risen from the grave by a mysterious crow to seek out his killers and force them to answer for their crimes." So that's the description of the movie. If you have not watched this movie, definitely watch this movie. It's super good. I'm going into the spoilery section of this video, which always happens when I get to the story, where I kind of briefly go over the story and say what happens to get a recap, so people who haven't watched the movie can know what happens in the movie. Movie starts with Eric dying and eventually him coming back from the grave and learning that he has regeneration powers. After seeing that his house was destroyed and what happened with his fiancée, he decides to go out and be a vengeful spirit. He finds Tintin first, which is a knife guy, and shows him up on knife skills, and then immediately after that he goes to Gideon's and basically forces Gideon to tell the rest of T-Bird's crew that Eric Draven is back. Throughout this, we also see Sarah and Sergeant Albrecht's perspective on this. On Sergeant Albrecht's side, we cut to the police side every so often whenever Eric kills someone and we see the aftermath of it. We also see Sarah kind of living on her own since her mother is a harlot, so she's going to be kind of that independent character of the movie. We also see that Sarah and Albrecht are actually pretty chill with each other. They were both there on that night where Eric and Shelley died, so they kind of have that connection with them. So after all of that, Eric goes and meets Funboy. This is where, you know, the incident occurred, by the way, in real life when they were filming this. But in the movie, Eric fills Funboy up with some needle drugs, and he helps Darla, which is Sarah's mom, and kind of has her go through a mental thing of saying drugs are bad and that she needs to be a better mother to Sarah. Eric talks to Albert at his apartment. Sarah goes to where Eric's been staying, you know, the house that he's living in. They talk, cooperate, and then eventually Eric goes to kill T-Bird. After T-Bird explodes in his car, Skank goes to a character named Top Dollar. At this point, we've seen Top Dollar with Gideon. Top Dollar kills Gideon because Gideon's a little brat. Top Dollar is also like the big mob guy of Detroit in this movie. Eric goes to Top Dollar's place because Skank is there while they are planning on their events for Devil's Night, and Eric gets in the biggest shootout that I think he's ever been in. This is where my gripe of this movie actually is. I'll get to that at my own rant at the ending. Anyways, Eric basically kills everyone except for Top Dollar, Tony Todd, and Top Dollar's sister. And then obviously Skank is killed in this too. So Skank is dead. After Skank has been killed, he finally goes back to the cemetery to rest because he's filled out his purpose. Top Dollar with Tony Todd and his sister all follow him to the cemetery where he was buried, and they eventually kidnap Sarah to use her as bait for Eric. Eric and Albrecht show up, obviously. They kill Top Dollar's sister, Ain't the Candyman, and then eventually Eric fights Top Dollar on the top of the church, where eventually Eric gives Top Dollar all of his emotional damage, and Top Dollar falls off the church. Then after this, Eric is finally able to rest, and he sees Shelley, smooches her, and then goes back into being a dead person. So overall, the story is very poetic. You got Eric quoting Edgar Allan Poe every so often. You have the representation of the crows. Crows represent good and bad omens. They also represent intelligence and transformation. Crows are also used as a gateway between life and death, or the spiritual world if you want to call it that. And this movie just makes you feel for Eric, and you feel his pain, and you really want him to accomplish his mission, which is kill all the people who have wronged him, like a normal revenge movie, and it's all satisfying to watch. All that in mind, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Real quick before I answer the questions, I wanted to give my own opinions on this movie. I really love this movie. Every time I watch it, I'm always having a good time. The story being on the macabre side of things, story-wise, is really cool and unique from other different action films. Mostly around this time, this movie really accepts the darkness of the plot and embraces it, and just works perfectly. The only thing that really bugs me in this movie is whenever Eric is shooting up Top Dollar's place, he has a revolver and he shoots it way too many times. Revolvers usually carry around 5 to 6 shots in the cylinder, and he shoots it way more than 6. So personally for me, it's really annoying, especially if you just stare at it and just see him just keep going with it. It gets a little annoying to see, but it's not the biggest thing that takes me out of the movie. It's just a very small gripe. Now, to answer the big questions. Does it hold up to this day? Yeah, 100% it does. You know, like I've said already, this movie is better than most movies that are coming out to this day. It's definitely very unique than some of these movies that are coming out, especially in 2024, since it's the sequel era of movies. Did it make an impact on Hollywood and society? Yes, in both, actually. The Crow impacted the goth culture at the time and also helped pave the way of how comic books can make things brutal and dark in their storytelling, and people will like it. It's also influenced a few movies, such as Fight Club, Watchmen, and Minority Report. Is it rewatchable? Yes, it's very rewatchable, it's very unique. You're not gonna really get bummed out with it because most of the stuff that's happening is not really what, say, some action superhero revenge movies are like these days. It's a time capsule of the 90s and everything with the music, and it just is a good time. And that's basically The Crow. I definitely would say that this movie is a near perfect movie. There are definitely some things that people don't like in this movie, which is totally fine, but for sure to me, I definitely think it's a near perfect revenge movie. Thank you for watching this video all the way. I've been trying to really get this video out and going. It took me a little bit to finally record, but that's only because I actually just got a new camera. It should look nicer. I'm actually in focus. Being out of focus is not my intention. It's just when I was using a DSLR camera, you know, when I was using this, it's really hard to see, especially since I had it in the corner of my desk and there's no way to pop this over to see if I'm in focus. I would have to manually get my light and kind of maneuver it back and forth to actually get everything working. But yeah, from now on, I'm going to be using this camera that I have. It's, I think, even better than this DSLR, mostly because that DSLR is like from like 2012, 2013, so it's pretty old at this point. This camera is definitely going to make recording way easier on me and hopefully get videos out faster. So again, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you really enjoyed it, please subscribe, press the like button, share this with some friends and family that you might think would enjoy this movie, and until then, I'll see you next time. Bye.